So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to go over some calculations to show you how to determine relative feed value. So for example, let's take into account soybean meal right now is about $583 a ton, and Distiller's grains is worth about $355 a ton. So is that a good buy? Is $355 a ton a good buy for something that has 29% crude protein, comparing to that to soybean meal, for example, that's like 49% crude protein? How do you make that comparison, and how do you know whether that value is there? So I'm going to show you a mathematical way of doing that. The thing we should be aware of is that this calculation assumes that all the proteins are of the same quality, which of course is not true, and so you should always have that in the back of your mind as you're doing this type of calculation. And so there's two different ways to do it. I'm going to show the two different ways. One maybe you may be more familiar with from your high school days, maybe the other one you have foggier memories of. So I just want to show both ways because they can both work. The first one is we can use what are called simultaneous equations. And when we do this, we're going to use corn grain and soybean meal as our base ingredients. Do that for a few reasons. First of all, we want to have one kind of high energy feed and one kind of high protein feed. And the other thing we want to do is we want to use feeds that are kind of common in Ontario, and corn and soybean meal, of course, are common here in Ontario. It doesn't really matter which ones you use in terms of another protein source. It'll just tell you relative to those ones rather than relative to corn and soybean meal. And so with the simultaneous equations, the first equation, what we're going to do is we're going to find out what the protein, okay, the protein level of soybean meal, corn grain is. So let me just actually, I'm going to write the word corn here, and then we're going to, this is equation 1, and we're going to use, it's got 8% crude protein, let's say, and I'm going to make protein is going to be the letter X, okay? And then if we add that, the value of the protein plus the value of the TDN, which is 88%, Y, and together those are going to equal the value of that feed. Now I just got finished saying that the feed is worth $287 a ton. The only problem with that, using that number directly, is that's an as-fed basis. We should really convert that to a dry matter basis. And so let's assume just for now that the dry matter of that corn is 90%. So that means we would take this 287 and divide it by 0.9, and we get a $318 value for that corn on a dry matter basis. Okay, so a ton of dry corn would be dried all the way down with no moisture in it, would be $318.89. So we can do the same thing with the soybean meal as well. So we're going to do this, and I'm just going to do SPM. And the soybean meal, we're going to go with 49% crude protein. Again, X plus the energy is about 84% TDN. So we're going to do 84, Y equals, and then here the value again. In this case, the value is going to be $583, and again we're just going to go with a dry matter percentage of 0.9, so that's what I have in there already, and so $583 right there. And so now we have our two equations right here. Okay, we have two equations and we have two unknowns, so the first thing we can do is we can take equation 1 and we can solve it for X. I'm going to try to do this in as few, like one step at a time, so that we don't do too many steps and make it too complicated, but hopefully you can follow this along. So if we do, first of all, I'm just going to always just copy these things down directly like that. So if we take everything else to the other side, so now I'm going to put equals here, and then we have the $318 and that cents. Now when we take that 88.88, or let me change this to percentages just so we can remember that they are percentages we're talking about. Okay, so if we have those numbers, now we're going to take that 88% Y to the other side, so it becomes a minus on the other side, and so we go equals 88 Y on that side. Now what we can do, again, this is a percent right here, remember? Okay, now we can divide both sides by this 8%, and we will then get X on this side. So X, so if I do equals 8 divided by 8, you get, well, that's a 1. Okay, that in this case is a 1. Okay, so X equals, and then we'll take this number right here and also divide it by that point, that 8%, minus, take the 88% and divide it by 8%, and we get that, Y. So we've just solved for X, Okay, I'm going to just remove this 1 here just because you understand 1x is x. Okay, so x equals that number right there. So the next thing I'm going to do, that's taking equation 1. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take equation 2 and I'm going to substitute this x in for this x up here. And so this is what x equals. So I can now remove that. So I'm going to go 49. So equals 49. And then we'll have an open bracket here. And then we're going to multiply that by this. Okay, now this is not a dollar sign. This should be a percent. Okay, that's that number right there. Close the bracket. And then we can put the rest of this equation in as it exists up here. So plus okay, now again, this is supposed to be a percent, not a, sorry, I'm just going to take the format painter here and paint that one so it looks the same. Okay, so now we have this equation. We've taken this x right here and we've substituted that into this x right here, sorry, into that x right up there. So now we can multiply this 49 out across this. So I'm going to go equals 49 times 3,900 that, and then we are going to go equals this minus, and then we're going to multiply the 49 times that for the y. Okay, and then we're going to then continue with this number as we go across till we get to the $647. Again, this is a percent. Now we can put like terms together. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the y's I'm going to leave the y's on this side, and I'm going to move the numbers to the other side. And so by doing that, I get equals y, and this is going to be just simply this minus, because there's a minus in front of that 539, so it's going to be negative 455% y, and it's going to equal this number right here minus this number over here. And so I get negative $1,305. Because they're both negatives, don't worry about that. That will come out here. So I go y, again, equals, and now I'm going to take this number and divide it by this number here, and I get y equals $286.90. That basically is telling you the value of 1 unit of TDN, because remember y stands for the TDN, is the $286.90. Now if we want to find out what the x equals, we can go back and we can calculate it based on using this equation right here, because we have a y and an x there. And so what I am going to do is I am going to do equals 3,986 minus that number times what we found out for y, and hit enter, and I get $830. So that means x is worth $830, y is worth $286. Okay, again, so that's the one way we can do it, and I'm going to show you how we're going to use these numbers here in a minute. The second way I'm going to show you how to do it, and it's considerably quicker, but you have to remember how matrices go. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a little 2x2 matrice using basically the same, that, and then we'll do the y. Okay, and we're going to set up a second matrice of the value of these feeds on a dry matter basis. Okay, the first thing we do with this case then is we're going to invert. This is a 2x2 matrice. We're going to invert it. So we go M inverse, open bracket, and then we block that matrice that we're doing and hit enter, and then hit enter, and there we can see the inverted matrice. Okay, it inverted that matrice. If you remember from high school, if you multiply these two matrices together, you're going to get that identity matrix where this is a 1, this is a 1, those are both zeros. Okay, if you remember how to do that. Now what we're going to do is we are going to now multiply M mult this matrice by this matrice right here, this little 2x1 matrice. And as you can see, now we have a matrix of 830 and 286. And by the way, that's exactly what those numbers are right there, 830, 286, 90. Okay, so it's just a very simple way to come up with this value. This is the X, this is the value of the Y, or the value of the protein, and the value of the TDN. Okay, so again, either way will work. And now the beauty of this again is, if, for example, the value of this number changes for some reason, let's say we go to $280 a ton, you can see how all the numbers all the way down there recalculate for you. Okay, so you don't have to keep on going back and trying to do all these calculations over. Once you get these equations set up the first time, it has been done for you. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to have a little thing down here. And by the way, what I would do is I would clean this up. I personally use this one right here. I'll show you my equation here in a minute that I have, my spreadsheet that I use. But you can clean this up and make the things yellow that are changeable. Okay, so for example, I could put corn here, soybean meal here. Again, I'm going to color these different colors. Actually, in this case, I want these ones to be colored, right? Because they're going to be the values that could change, and then those numbers will be there, and then we'll get all these other numbers. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up with new feeds. And by new feeds, I don't mean I'm coming up with feeds, but let's say I'm going to say bakery meal. Okay, I'm going to go with barley. I'm going to go with, I don't have an up-to-date price on canola meal, but I'm going to put canola meal in here as well. I'm going to go with the distiller's grains, DDGS, distiller's grains, and let's go with soy hulls, and let's go with oats. Okay, the first thing I want to know is I want to know the dry matter of those different feeds, the dry matter percentages. I want to know the crude protein percentages of those on a dry matter basis, and I want to know the TDN values of those on a dry matter basis. And so if I go down here to bakery meal, I looking it up the number, I see it's 90%. The barley I also have listed as 90%. The canola meal I have listed, basically I have most of these I think listed as 90%. The distillers I also listed as 90%. You can see that, again, you would put in numbers if you happen to know that they're a little bit different from that. The crude protein level of bakery meal is 12%. Of barley is 12%. Of canola meal is 40%. Distiller's grains is 29%. And soy hulls is going to be 13%. And the oats is going to be 13% as well. The energy levels of bakery meal I have listed are 0.9, and you can find these numbers on the internet. They might be a little bit difficult at times to find. 89%. Canola meal is actually a little bit lower in energy. It's only got about 71% energy, which could make it an interesting feedstuff for a creep feed for your replacement use, but I won't get into that right now. 92% right here, and then we have soy hulls is at 13%, and our oats is going to be that's not 13%. Sorry, the soy hulls is 77%, and then the oats are 76%. Okay. Sorry, I forgot to do this as well. I'm going to just increase the size of this so you can see hopefully a little easier. So I'm going to change all these things into a percent so we can read them cleanly here now. I'm going to make that larger. And the other thing I'm going to put in here is the cost. How much does this feed cost? And so the price I have right now for the bakery meal is $367. This is actually $367. The barley hull, I have a price of $250. I'm just going to change all of this to dollar signs for a second. $250. The canola meal, again, it's an old price. I don't know what it's going for right now, but you get the concept here. $355 for that. Soy hulls is another one I don't have an up-to-date price on. And then oats, I have a price here of $336 listed down here. Okay, so once I have these feeds in here, the first thing I want to do is I want to now find out what the value of these feeds are. Okay, so this is going to be the value. And now remember, these numbers are based on a dry matter basis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go equals First thing, I just do a big 2 brackets here, and I'm going to say how much protein is in there in this feed, multiply it by the value of the protein, which was this number up here, or that number right there, depending which one you want to use, and then what is the value of the TDN? The TDN is going to be that times the value, $286. Now that I have got that, I can also correct it for the dry matter, in which case I have to then multiply it by this 90% to get the value on a as-fed basis. Okay, remember up here when I did it, I divided it by 0.9 to correct for that dry matter. The dry matter is going to be worth more because there's more nutrients per ton, except for water, of course, and so here I have to bring that back into that calculation. So here I have to make that into a dollar sign. That is what its value is. So I can go through here again and I can take these values and I can put dollar signs on the 830 and that $286 so that they're frozen. They won't move on me. And I can simply just take this, copy it, highlight it down, and hit Control V, paste it, and there you can see all the values. Okay? So what I can do then is what I will do is I just do a relative value. And I can, if you want that to be, you can do something like that as well. I don't like this things being at the bottom. I don't know why that's the default. You can make that up to the top as well. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, what is the cost of this? Or what is the value of this? Okay, this is the value. This is how much it's actually going to cost me to buy it. Is it worth buying? It's got about an 88%. Its value is only $322 based on the protein and energy in it, and it's going to cost me $367. So the relative value is not there. Another way I like to put this sometime is good, bad, value. Okay, and again I'll wrap this text, maybe make it a wee little bit bigger so the bad is on the same thing. Now watch this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, equals if this number is larger than this number, then it's a bad value, end quote. If it's not the less than that, then I can put in good value, and then end quote, end bracket, hit enter. Okay, so now what I can do here is I can copy this down, and I can copy it either by hitting Control C and pasting down, or I can just click on this little box and just drag that down, and you can see it right there. So looking at this, the bakery meal, not a good value right now. Not worth buying bakery meal at that price. It's got to get down to this price before it's worth it for you to buy it. Okay, at this price, actually barley, if you can buy barley for $250 a ton, that is a good value. It's cheaper than buying corn and soybeans, so you might as well buy that barley then. Canola meal, it's a good value, but just barely a good value. Again, if I have to have an extra bin up to put it to use it or something like that, then it's probably not worth it to use it. This Distiller's grains, 128%, very similar to the barley. The larger this relative value is, the more worth it is. Okay, this Distiller's, in terms of the amount of protein and energy it has in it, it's worth about $454 a ton. You're only paying $355 a ton. Excellent value feed. Soy hulls, a good value at this price. Again, if this price is an accurate price. Oats, not really worth it at this price. They're only worth about $293 a ton, and if you're going to pay $336 for that, it's not worth it to buy it. Okay, so you can see basically as we go down here, I can now have a calculation. Next month, if prices change, if all of a sudden corn prices goes up to $300 a ton, I can just do the calculation and it does all the calculations in there for me automatically. If corn prices drop significantly and go down to $250 a ton, then you can see again, all of a sudden everything else becomes a relatively lower value than it was before because corn just became cheaper. If all of a sudden that soybean meal drops down to $450 a ton, then all of a sudden canola meal becomes a bad value, and Distillers is just barely a good value to feed. Okay, so you can just go in here and change those numbers based on whatever values you have out there. If you have slightly different numbers, if you test your corn and it comes out to 7%, you can just change that number to 7%. All the calculations going down from there will automatically happen for you, and you can have a very quick idea of what that relative value of the feed is compared to the cost. Just to give you again, just to make it clear, let's just actually put corn in here, back the way we have it actually up there. So we're at 7% and it's 88% TDN. and the cost is $287 a ton, and it's worth exactly $287 a ton. You can see that the Excel predicted the equation for me that would go down here, and it's exactly the same, and that's why those are equal for there. You can also do it now. You got to be careful if you want to do something like hay. So for example, let's say I want to do orchard grass hay. Let's say I can buy some orchard grass hay. Okay, and I'm going to say that orchard grass hay is about 85% moisture. The crude protein level on that is about 13%, and the TDN is about 61. Let's say 61% is an approximate number. So now I have an idea what the value is. It's worth about $244 a ton, or frankly, I might as well just go out and buy feed other things. The other thing you have to remember though is, of course, I need that orchard grass hay for the scratch value. Of course, I need it for the animal to be able to ruminate, and so therefore looking just at protein and energy may not be entirely an accurate way of doing things. But for example, if I can buy some good quality orchard grass hay, or I could buy some stuff that's a little bit more stemmy, a little bit more mature, it will provide all the scratch the animal needs. Maybe it's cheaper to buy that and just feed the corn and soybean meals, or in this case, Distiller's grains. And corn probably would be or barley to my animal, and to get that and get that scratch that way. Okay, so this type of calculator you can use to do all these types of calculations with. So again, you can either use the simultaneous equations, which is this part over here, okay, or you can go back and do the use matrices much quicker, but you kind of have to remember how the matrices work in order for it to be able to do it in that way as well. Okay, so that's just a brief introduction into understanding relative value. When you're going to go buy your feeds, and you want to think about changing, for example, from soybean meal to something else, I think in most cases there's going to be products that are going to be cheaper than soybean meal to be feeding sheep. I think Distiller's grains is almost always a good value to purchase for them. Canola meal can be at certain times. I've followed over the year. Certain times of the year it's very, very good. Other times of the year it's not the greatest. And in generally, I'll find that barley and oats do not pencil out, but you know what the prices are in your area for corn versus the barley and oats, and you can make that calculation yourself. So here's my calculator that I have made that I keep on my computer, and you can see I did it slightly different. I just use the matrices. I don't have the simultaneous equations, and what I've done is I have put the dry matter for the corn and the soybean meal up here as well. And so automatically that's a cost on an as-fed basis, so then it does this. So this is that second matrix that this one gets multiplied by in order to get these numbers here. These are the final numbers that then I can multiply by the 12% and the 90%. And if you look at it, for example, yeah, you can see I just did exactly that. So you can get that idea. I got the relative value and whether it's a good value or bad value here. You can see all the feeds I put in here. I change it around as I go. Again, these prices may not be accurate today. Some of these I haven't seen prices for in a while, but I just want to get a relative idea of what their value are. What I did here at the bottom I think is interesting is I just said, okay, what is every percent of crude protein worth? It's worth about $190. It's worth $7.47. That's a value, and 1% of TDN is worth about $2.58. Just on a dry matter basis, assuming 90% dry matter. Again, you can change these numbers to make them make sense. That's probably a little bit too dry for your haze, so you can just go down and make the different calculations that you want to find out what the value of it is. Now, one thing that I do want to be careful when I say this is you do not want to go changing out a feed completely. So let's say right now barley is a good buy, right? So I want to buy barley out, and all of a sudden barley gets very, very expensive. I'm not going to go changing to pulling out 100% barley and putting in corn tomorrow if it gets cheaper. You do not want to make that type of quick change to a ruminant's diet. You will upset the rumen, you're going to cause all sorts of problems. Depending on how big of a change, it's difficult to say right now, but usually my general rule of thumb was for my concentrate. When I did it, I would have, let's say, 4 ingredients that I would regularly use, and if one got to be a bad value, I would decrease it by 5% and then increase the other ones in order to fix that, but never decrease it by more than about 5% at a time, unless it's a new batch of animals. Let's say I'm bringing a new group of lambs in to finish, then I can just go with whatever's the cheapest. Okay, and going with the cheapest feed would be what we call least cost formulation. There's something else I like. I use a term, I don't know if it's where I heard it before, but it's called best cost formulation. Best cost formulation is I basically adjust what I'm feeding now slightly in order to be able to take advantage of cheaper costs of certain feeds. As that happens. And the other thing you can also do is pay attention over the year, because you'll see certain feeds get a little bit more expensive. Wheat shorts gets a little bit expensive, if I remember correctly, in December. So either buy them already in November before they get expensive, or maybe you want to substitute out a little bit of wheat shorts during that point in time as well. So pay attention to feed costs throughout the year. Find out when things are cheap, when they're expensive, and again, make slow modifications to that diet so that you don't upset the rumen function of your ewe or of your lambs.